Good morning, everybody. I hope you're having a great day so far. This morning, I want to talk to you a little bit about defining moments. Have you ever had one? Do you feel like you've had one? Maybe you've had more than one. They're not just limited to one. It's that one moment that just changes everything, the entire course of your life. You're at a crossroad, the road wise. You have left and you have right. You have to pick which way you go. Both ways end somewhere that you were unsure of. One of those pathways is your thought of where you should be, which, let's face it, some of the decisions I've made in my life, they weren't the best. They turned out in some pretty dead-end streets. But anytime that I've chose to follow God's path for me, it has worked out exactly how it should be. It may not always be a pleasurable ride, it might be a rough road to get there, but ultimately it is His purpose for me. If we look in the Bible, we can see that Moses had his defining moment with the burning bush. God commanded him to go back to Egypt and set the Hebrew people free. He wanted no part of leading them, but that defining moment came and he chose to follow God's path. Peter had that defining moment when he walked on water. When he decided to step out of that boat and walk toward Jesus Christ, that was his defining moment. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when they were in the furnace and they came out with no burns, not even the smell of smoke, that was a defining moment for them. They kept their faith. They didn't worship the statue. They went in the furnace, and guess what? God protected them. God was in there with them. Paul used to persecute, I can't speak today, Christians. People that follow Jesus Christ, he would persecute them. He would kill them. He would imprison them. Well, he was excitedly going to Damascus to get permission to persecute some more. However, Jesus Christ appeared to him in a bright, blinding light. And this was after Jesus was crucified. And that moment, that defining moment, he made the decision to follow Christ, teach of Christ. And he wound up writing almost half of the New Testament. 13, I believe, out of the 27 books of the New Testament. Paul wrote it. Daniel, he had a defining moment in the lion's den. Abraham, he had a couple defining moments, and honestly, he probably had more than that. So when he first was called to leave his home by God, he did it. Thank God, because that is what led us to where we are. That was the beginning of the path of our salvation. Another one was he was called to sacrifice his one son that he had wanted for so many years, was promised, but he and his wife did not have him until they were old and gray. So this child, Isaac, was so prized because he'd waited so long. He had the child way past a normal age range to have the child. Raised it. This was not a 1-year-old child he was called to sacrifice. Scholars believe 25 to 40 was how old Isaac was whenever he was called to sacrifice him. You've raised this child that you wanted your entire life for 25, 35, 40 years. You love this child, and you're called to sacrifice this child. But he decided. He trusted God, and he did it. And again, reward. He was rewarded. We were rewarded for his faith and his trust and choosing the right path. Noah, his defining moment was building the ark. Even though everybody doubted him, I'm sure he had doubts and worries and wonders. He built it for years. That defining moment that saved him and his entire family. Started the world over again. We all have some form of defining moment that God will ultimately use to lead us in the path that He wants us to go down. He wants us to take that path. But it's up to us to decide if we're going to go down His path or our path. We're limited on what we know. We are very finite. We are limited by time and space and gravity, and we don't even use most of our brains. So we are so limited. God is infinite. God is omnipresent. He is everywhere at every moment in time, past, present, future, inside space, outside space, everywhere. He knows everything. He is unlimited in what He knows, what He can do. So whose path do we take? His or ours? Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 through 6. This is the ESV translation. It tells us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make straight your paths." God will show us where to go. We just have to get off our butts and go down it. So who are we to question His guidance? A little understanding of that. I'm not going to read it because it's long and I don't want to bore you with me reading it. However, I do suggest you read it. If you go look at Job chapter 38 verse 1 and read all the way to chapter 40 verse 2. That was God talking to Job when Job kept questioning for what happened to him. Which Job went through a lot, and we all have questions. Finally, God said, you know what? You're going to keep on. This is what's going on. This is who I am. Who are you? And He described the many things that He does, that He's done, that He will do for us. And it's very humbling to see God in that light and the details of every fine thing that we never think about. So definitely check that out. Like I said, Job chapter 38 verse 1 to chapter 40 verse 2. However, in our lives, we are filled with little moments, experiences, trials and tests, tears and joy. But all of those moments they pale in comparison compared to that defining moment that God calls you and you decide to step out of your comfort zone and follow God's path for you. He pushes us out of our comfort zone because He tests us. He wants to test our faith, our trust, if we're willing to step out and truly follow Him. And when we do, He rewards that behavior. If we look to the book of Exodus, when the Hebrews were leaving Egypt. After they left Egypt, they were in the wilderness. They crossed the Red Sea, got away from the Egyptians. Red Sea fell in, crushed the Egyptians. They saw this. They saw the water part. They saw the water destroy them. They made it safe. They saw it with their own eyes. They saw the plagues. They saw all of this. They're in the wilderness. They are on the edge of the promised land that God has promised Abraham years and years ago. And they're on the verge. They had sent 12 spies to look over the land. They come back and it is great. It is everything they want. Grapes. It took 2 people on a pole to carry a thing of grapes. It was perfect. But there were giants. There were other tribes. And they were so scared. They didn't trust that God could get them through it. God could not help them beat these people and they would lose. So they told Moses and Aaron that no, we don't need to go. We don't need to go. They're going to kill us. They're going to destroy us. Well, out of those 12 spies, 2 people, Caleb and Joshua, they were like, no, God's got us. We can do this. That was their defining moment. They stood up and said, let's follow God. We got this. Well, guess what? They decided not to follow God. The other 10 people persuaded the rest of the Hebrew people not to follow God's path, not to cross over and go to the promised land. So at that point, bam, 40 years in the wilderness. 40 years. God provided for them, but rather than have a home and build houses and settle and start a new city, a new community. They were in the wilderness. They didn't have wells. There was a well without water. Again, God provided. There was no food. God provided. But it was a lesson because they chose the wrong path. And sometimes we go through those life lessons and things don't turn out how we plan. I think my first defining moment was losing my leg. It was not a pleasurable experience, but I chose at a point a little later what I want to do with that. I could be mad and upset and pout about it, or I could get over it and move on with my life. That defining moment, God used. He used it as an experience. It wasn't the big defining moment. The defining moment was the moment that I finally turned my life back over to Christ. And He has led me to preach the Word. That was my life-changing moment. And my life has in fact changed, and it has been wonderful. God blesses those that has faith and chooses His path over their own. We look at Luke 9:23 in the NIV. Jesus tells them, if you want to be my disciple, take up your cross and bear it daily. That means give up on our own thoughts, give up on our own lives, on what we want to do with our lives, and follow His. Doesn't sound simple, does it? But it really is. Once you give in and you follow His will, it'll all work out exactly how it is to work out, and you will be blessed for it. God takes care of His own people. So today, when you pray, before lunch, before dinner, randomly, before bed, whatever, whenever you pray, if you don't normally pray, say a prayer. Pray for the discernment and the understanding to understand God's path for you, the direction He wants you to take. Ask Him for His guidance so you can serve His will. His will be done for your life. You'll see. It will work out. So you need to decide today. You going on His path? Or are you your own? Are you going to a land of milk and honey? Or are you going to the wilderness? You have to make that decision. Have a blessed day, everybody, and be safe.